In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Oak Ridge Heights, life had always been predictable until Karen Hargrove decided to take matters into her own hands. For years, Jason Miller had lived peacefully in his modest home, enjoying convenience of his attached garage, which he used not only for parking but also as a workshop for his woodworking projects. But one fateful Friday afternoon, Jason returned from running errands to find something utterly baffling. Karen's luxury SUV parked snugly inside his garage. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen bee of the neighborhood, was infamous for her entitled behavior and disregard for boundaries. She had long coveted Jason's driveway, claiming it was better angled for a car than her own. Over the years, she had made countless passive-aggressive comments about how Jason didn't use his space efficiently. But this was beyond anything Jason could have imagined. Furious, Jason stormed over to Karen's front door, demanding an explanation. She greeted him with a smug smile, sipping coffee as if nothing were amiss. "Oh, didn't you get my note?" Karen asked sweetly, though her tone dripped with condescension. She waved a piece of paper at him, a hastily scribbled message claiming that since Jason rarely uses his garage, she had decided to borrow it for the weekend. According to Karen, this was a win-win. Her car would be safe from weather damage, and Jason wouldn't even notice. Jason couldn't believe what he was hearing. "This isn't borrowing, it's trespassing," he shot back, his voice rising. But Karen simply shrugged. "Relax, Jason. It's just a garage. You're barely in there anyway." Her dismissive attitude infuriated him further, but before he could respond, she shut the door in his face, leaving him standing on her porch, fuming. Determined not to let Karen bully him, Jason devised a plan. He calmly walked back to his house, grabbed his tools, and locked the garage door from the inside. Then, without hesitation, he packed a bag, hopped in his car, and left town for a week-long fishing trip he'd been planning for months. If Karen wanted his garage so badly, she could have it for 7 whole days. As Jason drove away, he couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of Karen trapped inside his garage, forced to deal with the consequences of her own audacity. Little did she know, this wasn't just about reclaiming space. It was about teaching her a lesson she wouldn't soon forget. Karen Hargrove awoke Saturday morning feeling rather pleased with herself. She had successfully commandeered Jason's garage, and as far as she was concerned, it was a brilliant solution to her parking woes. But when she strolled over to retrieve her SUV later that day, she discovered something shocking. The garage door wouldn't budge. No matter how many times she pressed a remote or yanked on the manual release cord, the door remained stubbornly shut. Panic began to creep in as Karen realized she was effectively locked out. And worse, her car was now trapped inside someone else's property. At first, Karen assumed this was some sort of mechanical malfunction. She called a locksmith, only to be told they couldn't assist without Jason's permission since it wasn't her garage. Frustrated, she tried contacting Jason directly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. It didn't take long for her to piece together what had happened. Jason hadn't just left town. He deliberately locked her in, and judging by the lack of response, he had no intention of letting her off easily. As the hours turned into days, Karen's initial irritation gave way to mounting desperation. Her luxury SUV, her pride and joy, was useless, sitting idle in Jason's garage while she scrambled to find alternative transportation. Uber rides were expensive, and borrowing her neighbor's beat-up sedan felt like a humiliating downgrade. Meanwhile, whispers spread through Oak Ridge Heights as residents caught wind of the bizarre standoff. Some found humor in Karen's predicament, snickering behind her back about karma. Others openly sided with Jason, praising him for standing up to her entitled antics. But the real turning point came when Karen ventured into Jason's garage in search of solutions. At first, she saw it as merely an empty space, a blank canvas waiting for her car. However, as the days dragged on and boredom set in, she began noticing details she'd overlooked before. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, shelves lined with jars of screws and nails, and half-finished woodworking projects scattered across workbenches. There were even photos pinned to the wall. Snapshot of Jason teaching his kids how to build birdhouses, proud smiles frozen in time. For the first time, Karen realized the garage wasn't just storage. It was a sanctuary, It represented creativity, hard work, and family bonding. Each tool had a purpose, each project a story. As she sat there amidst the sawdust and with shavings, Karen felt a pang of guilt. She had dismissed Jason's space as insignificant, assuming he wouldn't mind her intrusion. Now, surrounded by evidence of its importance, she understood just how wrong she had been. By the third day, Karen's bravado had crumbled completely. She reached out to mutual friends, begging them to intervene on her behalf. "I didn't mean any harm," she pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what I thought." Her vulnerability shocked those who knew her best. The same woman who once berated neighbors for minor infractions was now reduced to apologizing profusely, desperate for forgiveness. Jason, however, remained unfazed. He returned home exactly 1 week later, tan and relaxed from his fishing trip, to find Karen pacing anxiously outside his house. When he finally unlocked the garage door, revealing her gleaming SUV untouched but dusty, Karen practically burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, Jason," she blurted out, her voice trembling. "I never should have done this. Please, can we start over?" Jason Miller stood in his driveway, arms crossed, as Karen Hargrove poured out her apology. Her usual air of superiority was gone, replaced by genuine remorse. For a moment, Jason considered letting her stew a little longer, but then he remembered why he'd done this in the first place. It wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching Karen a lesson she wouldn't forget. And judging by the tears streaming down her face and sincerity in her voice, it seemed the message had hit home. "Karen," Jason said finally, his tone firm but not unkind, "you can't just take what isn't yours because it suits you. That's not how communities work." He gestured toward the garage, now filled with the faint scent of sawdust and memories. "This space means something to me. It's where I create, where I spend time with my family. You treated it like it was nothing, and that hurt." Karen nodded vigorously, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I get it now, Jason. Really, I do. I was selfish and thoughtless, and I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do to make it right." Her voice trailed off, but the sincerity in her expression was undeniable. Jason paused, considering her offer. While part of him wanted to leave things as they were, to let Karen sit with the consequences of her actions, he knew holding on to resentment wouldn't help anyone. Instead, he saw an opportunity for growth, not just for Karen, but for the entire neighborhood. "There's one thing," he said slowly. "Help me organize a community cleanup day. We'll fix up the park, repaint the benches, maybe plant some flowers. Show everyone that you're serious about making amends." Karen blinked in surprise, clearly expecting a harsher punishment. But after a moment, she broke into a tentative smile. "I'd love to," she said earnestly. "Thank you, Jason. Thank you for giving me another chance." The following weekend, Oak Ridge Heights buzzed with activity as residents gathered for the much-anticipated cleanup event. Karen showed up early, rolling up her designer sleeves and diving into the work with unexpected enthusiasm. She hauled trash bags, scrubbed graffiti off picnic tables, and even helped paint a mural on the playground wall. Neighbors who had once avoided her began warming up, impressed by her willingness to roll up her sleeves and contribute. By the end of the day, the park looked better than ever, and so did Karen's reputation. For Jason, the transformation was remarkable. The woman who had once strutted around the neighborhood demanding compliance was now actively engaging with her neighbors, asking how she could help rather than dictate. Slowly but surely, fences began mending, replaced by shared purpose and mutual respect. Even those who had been most skeptical of Karen's change of heart admitted that her efforts seemed genuine. Meanwhile, Jason reclaimed the garage with renewed appreciation. He spent hours tidying up, organizing tools, and finishing the woodworking projects he'd started before the incident. When neighbors stopped by to thank him for standing up to Karen and for inspiring her redemption, he simply smiled. "It takes a village," he said humbly. "We all play a role in making this place feel like home." As the weeks turned into months, Oak Ridge Heights flourished under its newfound spirit of collaboration. Monthly potlucks brought residents together, workshops fostered new skills, and friendships blossomed where tensions once simmered. At the center of it all stood Jason's garage, a symbol of resilience, creativity, and the power of boundaries. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, Jason felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Yes, the ordeal had been frustrating, filled with moments of anger and disbelief. But through perseverance, he had not only reclaimed his space, but also inspired others to treat each other with kindness and respect. As he stood beside his workbench one crisp autumn evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jason smiled softly. The battle may have ended, but the story was far from over. Together, they had embarked on a new chapter, one rooted in hope, harmony, and the unshakable belief that home is more than walls and roofs. It's a place where hearts find belonging and dreams take flight.